Hello. My neighbor's kids see me and they probably think I'm so weird because I'm talking to a camera, but I have to have the door open because it lets natural light in, so I don't care. Hi. So 2018 was a really good year for me reading-wise. This is about half the books I read. A lot of them I borrowed from someone, or then when I finished reading them, I lent them to someone else. So yeah, I have 8 books here. I actually read 15, which I think is the most books I've probably ever read in a year. I know it's not a lot for some people, but for me, it's definitely some improvement. And a lot of these books I actually liked a lot, so clap. When I clap, that's how you know I'm serious about something. So now I'm going to go through each one and tell you kind of my thoughts about it. The first book I read was Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I actually borrowed this from Amber, and I loved it so much that I bought my own copy. I don't think I've ever done that with a book other than maybe Harry Potter, so this is a pretty big deal. This book is really freaking good. Yeah, it kind of took over my life for a while, the book and the movie, but especially the book. I did like the movie a lot, but the book is always going to be more special to me. I just really like Becky Albertalli's writing style. She writes high school students in a way that doesn't feel like an old person trying to write a high school student, and they make them like weirdly like whiny and dramatic. I hate when they do that. She actually does a good job of sounding like a high school student. I talked about the plot of this in my 2018 favorites video, but basically it's about a closeted gay guy in high school, and he finds this pen pal online who also goes to his school. He calls him Blue, and they email each other back and forth, but they don't know each other's identities. And they kind of start falling for each other, and it's really cute, but they don't know who it is. So the whole time Simon's kind of like, I think Blue is this guy, I think Blue is this guy. And you're kind of like trying to decide who you think it is. I actually figured out who Blue was, like halfway through the book, and I was really proud of myself. So yeah, the romance is really cute, but the major like drama of the book is that another kid at school finds out about Simon's emails, and he threatens to out him to the whole school, and obviously that is terrifying. So there are funny and cute and romantic parts, but there's also this like scary drama stuff going on. And I really love how throughout the book he loves his friends in such a cool platonic way that I've never seen addressed in a book or in any media. But like he'll be like looking at Abby and he's like, Abby's just like so pretty. I just want the best for her because she's so awesome. And I'm like, that's what I do. I'm like, I love my friends so much. It's not like a romantic thing at all. I'm just like, you are amazing and I want the best for you. And I'm like, thank you. I just love the way he talks about everything, the way he talks about friends, the way he talks about performing, the way he just like sees people kind of complexly. He's just a very mature high school student, and it's refreshing to read about a mature high school student. The next book I read was another Becky Albertalli book because I was really obsessed with her, and that is The Upside of Unrequited. This is her first book, and I do feel like it's not as good as Simon. I mean, her writing style is still good, but you can tell in Love, Simon that she has a bit more experience in the plot, and certain things just feel a little bit more fleshed out. But yeah, there's also some really great casual representation in this book. The main character is straight, but her twin sister is gay, and she has 2 moms, and the moms are interracial, and one of them is Jewish. You know, they talk about all these things that, like, it's not, like, central to the book, but, like, they'll occasionally mention them, you know what I mean? It's just, like, this is part of their lives, and it's not a big deal to them because this is how their family is and they're used to it. So in this book, the main character, Molly, is really insecure. She thinks she'll like never find love ever, and Cassie decides that she's gonna try to help set Molly up with someone. And it turns into this thing where, you know, Molly has to decide if she likes this guy that her sister's trying to set her up with, or if she likes this guy that she works with. And, you know, it's cute, it's entertaining. You have to decide like who you ship her with and hope that she ends up with that guy, and you know, it's a high school little romance. I do like that they show her actually working. I feel like in high school, stories, they never mention that, like, high schoolers a lot of the time work part-time jobs. But yeah, that was really nice that, like, it's not like I'm in high school and all I do is go to school. It's like I'm in high school and I go to school and I have friends and I work, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's what high school students do. But overall, it's a pretty good book and it's pretty entertaining. And the next book I read, the last Becky Albertalli book, so don't worry, I'm going to stop talking about her for a while, was Leon the Offbeat. I just really like... Oh, I forgot about this. Sorry. I was going to say Leon the Offbeat is also in the Simon universe, but Upside of Unrequited is in the Simon universe too, which is really cool. One of the characters is Abby from Simon universe. They're cousins. So there's this part where she's talking to Abby on the phone or something, and Simon's there, and he's like, do you like Harry Potter? I like Harry Potter. And they start, like, talking about Harry Potter with, like, this person that the main character doesn't know, but it's, like, the main characters of two different books talking to each other about Harry Potter. It's cute. But anyway, Leon the Offbeat is actually about Leah, who is Simon's best friend. And I liked this one a lot. I would say I liked it more than Upside, but maybe not as much as Simon. I guess some of the things that I'm going to say are spoilers if you haven't read Simon vs. Homo Sapiens Agenda yet. But it says it on the cover of Leon the Offbeat, so I don't really feel too bad for telling you. Basically, the plot is that Leah is bi, and she's only out to her mom. No one else knows, not even Simon. And it's her senior year, you know, she's just trying to apply to college and do her band thing, which I guess is also kind of a spoiler. And I don't want to tell you more because a lot of the focus of the book is these two people that she likes and who she'll end up with, and I really don't want to spoil too much. But I will say one thing that I really liked about the book is that I think she represents bisexuality quite well. I mean, I know that it's a spectrum and, like, there are various types of bisexuality, but she does a good job of, you know, addressing some of the nuances, and there's this really nice scene where she's talking to another character. Basically, one character is kind of figuring themselves out, and Leah is not very pleased with it because she's kind of blaming this other person for, like, just wanting to experiment and, like, toying with Leah's emotions, which hurts, and that, you know, sucks. But at the same time, the other character is just trying to figure out what they want in life, you know? So it's really interesting, and I like that it shows both sides of the story. And, I mean, I was reading it and I was kind of like, Leah's kind of wrong. It doesn't present it like Leah's right and this is the only way someone can be bi. You know what I mean? And I think that's really cool. Okay, moving away from Becky Albertalli finally, the next book that I read is All the Light We Cannot See. So here's my thing. I know this book is supposed to be, like, objectively good. It won a Pulitzer Prize. Like, it's a pretty big deal. But I just can't do historical fiction. So this book took me, like, almost a year to read. And the writing is really good, the concept is good, it's just that historical fiction is not for me. But basically, it takes place during World War II, it focuses on a blind girl and this young boy who's really good at making and repairing radio equipment, and how their paths cross. And I really like the characters and the concept in general, and there were definitely parts of the book that I liked a lot. There's kind of this magical realism thing going on with this, like, magic diamond that has this curse on it, and it doesn't play a huge role in the book. I think if the diamond had played a bigger role, I would have liked it more. Because once that magical realism aspect got in there, I was like, ooh. But then it would go back to, you know, talking about the war, and, you know, it's interesting to learn about history and stuff, but it's just, for me, it's not something that I'm tremendously interested in. I'm sorry. But yeah, overall, good, really good writing, pretty interesting characters, some really funny scenes actually at times, and some fun magical realism. So if you like historical fiction, I think you might like All the Light We Cannot See. The next book that I read is not Percy Jackson, The Last Olympian, but as I've been reading the Percy Jackson books, I give them back to Amber because I'm borrowing them from her. So I read book 3, and I've already given it back to her. So this is the closest thing we have. So I read Titan's Curse, and I liked it a lot. I definitely liked it more than the second one, but not as much as the fourth one, which I'll talk about in a bit. I think the biggest thing about the third one is that you get a lot of new characters, and I really liked a lot of them. First of all, Zoe Nightshade is a queen. I really like Zoe. She kicks butt, she doesn't need no man, and she just, like, leads around a group of kick-butt girls, and they do awesome stuff, and they're immortal because they don't like guys, and I'm like, yes, that's amazing. Love Zoe Nightshade. Nico is my son. He's an adorable little child who just likes to play with his little monster things, and then at the end, there's a plot twist, and I'm like, whoa! He's just a very determined little child, and I love Nico. And then I really like Rachel Elizabeth Dare. Now, I know that she might be controversial, especially if you're a big Annabeth fan, but I just like Rachel. She's cool. She isn't as dramatic and jealous as Annabeth. I mean, look, like, I'm 90% sure that Percy and Annabeth end up together, but I can't help but kind of like Rachel more. I just like, she's more mature. She definitely has some interesting backstory that I don't think you actually learn about until book 4. She's really cool, and she has a different kind of perspective than all the demigods, so I think that's nice. And she's just sassy, but not in, like, an annoying way, you know? I don't know. I like Rachel. So, yeah, Titan's Curse, it's pretty much just like any other Percy Jackson book. They're fighting monsters, they're going on quests, all that stuff. To me, this felt a little bit more like a filler book leading up to book 4, where things start getting really dramatic. But some important stuff happens in this book, you know, with Luke and stuff. So yeah, it's a good one. After that, I read Ready Player One. I talked about this a little bit in my What I Read in 2017 video. And at the time, I really didn't like it. I was so annoyed with how slowly I was reading it because the font is so small. I picked this book back up again when we went on vacation in Michigan. And maybe it was because I had so much time because we were on vacation. I don't really know what it was, but I started reading through it a lot faster. So I gave a better summary of it back in my 2017 video. But basically, a guy invents a really cool game that everyone spends their entire life playing. And when he dies, he creates this egg hunt. And whoever finds the grand prize, which is the egg, wins a whole bunch of money. And they get control of the game. So once the actual egg hunt began, I started to like the book a lot more. I do like those things where you're kind of trying to piece certain things together, so that helped me a lot. And then they introduced Artemis, and I liked Artemis as a character. She helped make it more entertaining for me. In retrospect, though, I was a little bit disappointed with how challenging some of the hints were. Seriously, you had to have some really niche knowledge about a fictional character, so I think a lot of the hints, like, no one could have found out, you know? But the last hint, I did figure some of it out, and that made me feel pretty cool. But I prefer books where you actually stand a chance of figuring out what some of the hints mean. But yeah, it was still entertaining. The font was very small, so it still took me forever to read, but I liked it more than I did last year when I started trying to read it. It moves kind of slow at first, but if you can get past the first, like, 100 pages, it's pretty good. The next book that I read is None of the Above by I.W. Gregorio. I just saw this on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, and I said, well, that looks like it's about being, you know, not on the gender binary or something, and picked it up. I thought it was really interesting. It's not about gender, it's more about being intersex, which does relate to gender at times, but it's not about, like, an agender person. It's about someone who's intersex. But, you know, I read the little blurb, and I was like, that sounds interesting, and it was only $10, so I got it. Finally got around to reading it this year, and it was okay. So it's about a girl who's in high school, and she finds out that she's intersex, and she isn't sure how to tell her friends and her boyfriend, and she has to come to terms with it herself, and, you know, all those challenges of finding out something about yourself. And it's good. I mean, I learned a lot about what it means to be intersex and what it's like and the things that you might go through if you are an intersex person. But I don't feel like the writing is great. It says that the author is a practicing surgeon by day, masked, avenging young adult writer by night, and you can kind of tell that she is truly a surgeon. A lot of the writing gets kind of bogged down by technical terms, which could be really useful if, you know, an actual intersex girl is reading this book. She might be like, wow, I relate to that, and thank you for explaining that in a technical way. But for me, it was a little bit, you know, it felt like the story was flowing along, and then suddenly it was like, and then she goes to the doctor and she learns about being intersex, and then she goes back to high school and things are normal. And there's not much crossover between, like, her everyday life and the way being intersex actually affects her, if that makes sense. The way it affected her in her everyday life felt kind of forced to me, and it was just that she told her friends and they were jerks, and she told her boyfriend and he was like, you're not a girl, I don't want to date you anymore. And I mean, I know that that happens to some people, and that's serious and sad, and I don't want to downplay that, but just the way the drama was written felt a little bit forced and not like the way I knew high schoolers to act when I was in high school in a very conservative town in Arkansas. So yeah, I don't love the writing, but overall I learned something, and that's really nice. And I know there aren't a lot of books out there about being intersex, so if that's something that you want to learn about, I think it's still worth a read. The next book I read was Outliers, which my dad lent to me. Basically, it's a bunch of short stories that kind of indicate ways that success might not actually be based 100% on how hard you try. There are other factors that play into why someone is successful. So one of the chapters is about how all the really well-known hockey players in Canada were born in December, January, or February, I think. And he goes into this whole analysis of how the reason for that is probably because when young children start playing hockey, the year of hockey starts in December. So children who are born in December, January, or February are the oldest on their team, which makes them the strongest on their team and the fastest, and it basically makes them the best. So the next year, because they were the best, they got the most playtime, and the coach probably helped them more because they thought, wow, this kid's good. So on, until maybe they even get sorted into a different league because they're so good. But basically it's saying that the hockey players who wind up being the most successful might not have actually been born more talented than the others, right? There are just a lot of really interesting stories of, how success might not seem like what you think it is, and yeah, it's really interesting. The next book I read was another book that I took from my parents. It's the March graphic novel series by John Lewis. It's kind of like an autobiographical graphic novel series, and John Lewis is telling his story of how he participated in the civil rights movement. And even though, we learn about the civil rights movement in school, I learned so much more from these graphic novels because they were obviously written by someone who was really there and played a major role. Like, I didn't know about the multiple organizations that kind of disputed over what's the best way to handle certain things. When you hear about it in school, you kind of imagine it like, well, Black people were oppressed, and then there was a sit-in, and then there was a march, and then everything was okay. And that's not true. There were like tons of sit-ins and tons of marches, and people died, and really, really crappy things happened. So I learned a lot. The format of it in a graphic novel also makes it, I think, a little bit more captivating to read. Earlier I said I don't like historical fiction, but I think the graphic novel format really, really helped me. So yeah, super duper would recommend March by John Lewis. The next book that I read was Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I read this for a reading group that I'm in, and it's very focused on education and pedagogy, obviously, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I don't think this is something that a lot of you guys are probably interested in. But basically, it's written by a Brazilian educator from the 70s, and it kind of focuses on how the classroom can be an oppressive environment, which might sound like a bit of an exaggeration when you first hear it, but for me as an ESL teacher, I'm going to always have minority students, especially if I'm always teaching in the US. So I think it's important to me to kind of take a step back and think about the privileges that I have that my students don't, and how I can build them up in the classroom. I think it's just really good for me, at least where I am in my teaching, to be thinking about these things and how students can experience oppression and how you can kind of combat that as an educator. The next book that I read was Welcome to Night Vale. It still has a bookmark in it because Eric's reading it now, but I promise I finished it. As I mentioned in my 2018 favorites video, I am really into Night Vale lately, so obviously I had to read the book. I think the biggest thing that I took away from this is if you're looking for just a longer version of an episode of Night Vale, this is not it. It focuses a lot on characters that aren't Cecil, which isn't necessarily bad, and there is plenty of Cecil in there. Basically, like every 2 or 3 chapters, it'll be like an excerpt from an actual Night Vale broadcast. But yeah, it focuses on 2 characters, Diane Creighton and Jackie Fierro, and they both basically have these weird pieces of paper that say King City, and they're stuck to their hand, and when they try to like throw it across the room, it just appears back in their hand. It's very Night Vale, right? So they find each other and, you know, they try to figure out, like, what the deal is with these pieces of paper, how to get them to stop sticking to their hands. And I think even if it's not like a normal episode of Night Vale, you definitely learn a lot about how Night Vale is as a town, and you learn about different aspects of the community, which is really nice. My biggest problem with this book is that it just felt like it kept going and going, and I feel like there were parts that could have been, like, cut out. I feel like it doesn't have to be almost 400 pages, you know? They definitely could have fit just as interesting of a story into 300. But I will say one thing that I really liked about this book is that it showcases two women. It focuses on Diane, who is a mom, she has a son, and then Jackie, who is almost the same age as Diane's son. So there's this really interesting relationship where Diane thinks that she, you know, because she's older and wiser, she can tell Jackie what to do. And Jackie's like, you know what? I'm 19. I'm technically an adult. Like, stop telling me what to do. And yeah, you wonder if they'll ever see eye to eye. And just the way that it presents both perspectives is well done. It doesn't just, like, write Jackie like she's immature or just write Diane like she's naggy. It does a good job of showing both perspectives. So yeah, it's well written, it's entertaining, and I can't wait to read It Devours. The next book that I read is An Apple? The next book that I read is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Oh my goodness. I pre-ordered this. I got a signed copy, as you can see. I did not get a Hankler fish, which made me sad. I really wanted a Hankler fish, but I got Hank Green's signature. This book is absolutely remarkable. It seriously is so good. I don't even know if I like Hank Green or John Green more as an author now, and it's very sad. No offense, Hank, but I did not expect to like your writing this much. It's very good, so good job. So yeah, the plot is the main character, April May, finds this weird statue in New York City, and she thinks it's an interesting art installation. So she calls up her friend, and they make a YouTube video saying, you know, look at this cool statue, come support this artist. And then plot twist, it's not actually art. It's a weird alien something no one really knows, but they've appeared in all the major cities across the US, and no one knows why, no one knows how, but they start calling them the Carls because that's what April called it in her video. She was like, I'm gonna name this guy Carl. So they just started calling them all Carls. But April gets really famous because she was the first person to take a video of them. So it focuses on fame and how it can kind of make you do crappy things. Also, there's just a really awesome kind of mystery sci-fi stuff going on with the Carls. You know, you're trying to figure out what the deal is with them. And I could not stop thinking about it. It made me want to keep reading it. It's really good. After that, I read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. Basically, my friend posted on Facebook, hey, who wants to read books with me? And I was like, I do. So she told me she wanted to read this book, and we read it together. While I was reading it, I was kind of updating her, like, ooh, this just happened. That's interesting. Ooh, I wonder what this character is gonna, you know. So yeah, that made it kind of entertaining that I was able to, like, keep her posted. It was kind of like live tweeting a book. But basically, this guy dies, and he meets people in heaven. Duh. It's really good, though. Like, you learn stuff about his life through his death. Like, the first person you meet was someone that he knew when he was a child. So by meeting him in heaven, you learn a lot about Eddie, the main character's childhood. It's a really good premise. It's well written. And you can definitely tell there's some symbolism there that I couldn't figure out on my first read through. So I kind of want to read through it again and see if I can catch some of the symbolism. That's pretty much all I have to say. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was a really good book, and it's not too long. I read through it pretty quickly, which was good. After that, I read, still not Percy Jackson The Last Olympian, I read Percy Jackson Battle of the Labyrinth, which I want to go ahead and say is my favorite Percy Jackson book. The fourth Harry Potter book is my favorite Harry Potter book, too. I guess that 4 is a good number for me for some reason. But I love me a good labyrinth. Part of the reason I liked Goblet of Fire is because of the labyrinth and Goblet of Fire. I like labyrinths. I like the idea of, like, this creepy psychological place where, you know, you're imagining things that aren't really happening, and it's creepy and it's interesting, and I like it a lot. But basically, there's an opening to Camp Half-Blood through the labyrinth, and the campers obviously don't want the enemy to invade them through the labyrinth. So they need to go down in there and get this guiding string before the enemy can get it, because otherwise they would be able to find Camp Half-Blood really easily. So yeah, it's just interesting, and Grover's back, and I love me some Grover. He plays a pretty important role in this book, and there is some Percy Annabeth development, but it's not forced, which I like, because they're in a freaking labyrinth. Everyone's forced to be, in confined space and stuff. And yeah, I just like the way the relationship develops, but then at the end, Annabeth goes back to being an annoying little jealous person of Rachel, and I did not like that. I want to like Annabeth, I do, but she's so immature. I'm like, ugh. But, yeah, good book, Battle of the Labyrinth, and I am, as you can see, halfway through The Last Olympian, so that'll be one of the first things that I talk about next year. The last book that I read is Let It Snow, which has 3 authors, as you can see. This is basically 3 short stories about how a major snowstorm affected 3 different groups of people across the U.S. The first story is by Maureen Johnson, and I've never read any of her writing, so I wasn't really sure how I would feel about it, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't love her writing style. She's also kind of an example of a high school student that I'm like, it just wasn't how I was in high school, so it makes it not very relatable for me. The main character's name is Jubilee, and Jubilee won't stop saying, like, I know, Jubilee's a stripper name, like, stop making fun of me. And I'm like, I never said that Jubilee was a stripper name. I think that's a cute name. Like, what? Every time she introduces herself, she's like, my name's Julie. And I'm like, okay, if you hate your name that much, you're probably used to calling yourself Julie at this point. The overall plot of the story is cute, and they're all, like, I don't think I mentioned this, but it's 3 holiday romances. So the romance in it is kind of sweet, but there is this overarching theme between all 3 stories that is, cheerleaders are awful and nerdy girls are great, and you should always end up with a nerdy girl, because cheerleaders are bad. No, like, okay, this was written in, 2008, which was, the nice guy era. I get it, it's what was trendy, but I do not like the shame of the cheerleaders, and I don't know. Let me know what you think of Maureen Johnson, because I might give her another try, but this one, not my fave. John Green's part, obviously, was my favorite. I mean, I love me some John Green. He writes high school students like the way I saw myself in high school. And I realized when I was reading this, because I've heard people say that they have this problem with John Green because he writes high school students, way too clever. And high school students don't really talk like that. And I'm like, you're right. But when I was in high school, I thought I sounded like that. So I think that's what it is for me. It's how I perceived myself in high school. John Green's is nice, and it's not too focused on the romance either. I think it's a lot more focused on just kind of a silly little anecdote, which is more entertaining for me, I think. But here's my beef with early John Green. Why does he have to give every character a weird name? Like, in Looking for Alaska, it's the Colonel and Pudge, and in this one, there's the Duke, and I'm like, we get it. Your characters are original. Can't you just name them, Charlie or something normal? Sheesh. So that's my one complaint about John Green's section. And then the last story was by Lauren Miracle, and this one really wasn't doing it for me. The whole purpose of this story was that the main character was really selfish, and by the end, obviously, she's supposed to learn her lesson. But throughout the story, every time someone accuses her of being selfish, it was because of something that, was completely out of her control. She's supposed to go run an errand for her friend, but she gets swamped at work, and, she physically, can't leave. And her friends are like, you're so selfish, and she's, thinking as the narrator, oh man, why did I do that? I'm so selfish. And I'm like, you're not. It wasn't your fault. I don't understand. It's that show, not tell thing, right? They really tell you that she's selfish, but I was never shown that she was selfish. So that just really threw off the whole thing for me. I was just really confused. I guess I'll say what I said for Maureen's section, which is that the plot was entertaining, but the writing and the characterization were what? I don't understand. It was just weird to me. But that was the last book that I read in 2018. Didn't end on a super high note, but I did start reading The Last Olympian, which I'm really liking so far, and I will let you guys know my full thoughts on this book in a year from now. So yeah, as you can see, I read a lot this year. I hope this video isn't too long because it's been like an hour and 15 minutes in real life. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Let me know in the comments if you guys have read any of these books. Did you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree? Why or why not? All that good stuff. And if you haven't read any of these books, what did you read this year? Did you read anything this year? If you didn't, that's great. You probably spent your time doing other awesome things, so good for you. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!